This is kind of a craft question until we get a few more. So you had a piece just the other day from San Fernando, which was also about Miriam Rodriguez, who was trying to figure out what happened to her missing child. And one thing I was very impressed by that when I read that, and then I was thinking about our conversation coming today, was you have a great way of like doing narrative journalism, but you're also bold in one thing. You're willing to take something that happened in 2017 and then flip it into the lead and then use that as like something to build upon. It doesn't have to be happened yesterday or occurred on Tuesday. And I thought that was something as long as we're talking about craft, I thought that was fascinating because you can give an immediacy that something happened. Your lead was Miriam Rodriguez clutched a pistol in a purchase. He ran past the morning crowds to blah, blah, blah. I thought that was a great lead. But then you realize later it would happen. It happened a couple of years beforehand, and then she's killed, and all these other terrible things happen. Not to spoiler alert, and I don't mean to be glib about that. It was a terrible story, but I like that way to do things. But it's not typical sort of journalism, right? To go back and do it that way. And I like that narrative approach. And I'd like to see it more because you sometimes need a couple of years to tell a story, right? And it doesn't need to start in 2017, comma, blah, blah, blah happened. You need to get people to read it. And then you can roll out what we know, because what we know in the first day of coverage of any news story is often nothing, right? It's just the beginning. So maybe talk a little bit about your thinking on that, how you played that. It was very excellent.
Thank you. I appreciate that. When it comes to craft on a story like that, I mean, the story of Miriam Rodriguez, and for those on the call who aren't familiar with it, her daughter was kidnapped in 2014 by a local cartel for ransom, and then ultimately killed. She didn't know it at the time. Her family paid 2 ransoms. She even sat it. And then ultimately something snapped and she just decided, you know what, come what may, I'm going after these guys. And she went down and she hunted them down one by one, doing investigative work all on her own without any help from the police or the government, whose lack of control gives way to this sort of reality where your daughter can get kidnapped and there's nobody to help you, nothing you can do. And ultimately she put all these people in jail, and then one of them came back and killed her. So her story was so compelling. And it took me months and months and months to get all those details because, as you know, in the haze of trauma, people don't remember things clearly, or we're often not there. And so you have to validate with court records and documents and police reports and all kinds of other external fixed data points to then integrate these narrative details and sort of validate and verify. But once we had that, I thought, what a story. But as you said, Bill, you can't, it's hard to tell a story from 2017. There's not some reason for people to read it now, at least in the context of a newspaper. And so this summer I began looking like, how can I update this story? Is there something that's going on that gives this contemporary life? And I found out about the kidnapping of Luciano Leal Garza. And
yeah, so and that brought it up. But at the same time too, I think there's, I mean, I think this story was kind of genius. I like the way, love the way you did it. But also, I think that we fail sometimes, and we can't go back. Oh, this terrible thing that I've deeply reported happened in 2019. Because of the word 2019, I can't touch it. I mean, I think this is the way to tell these stories sometimes, just as you did with this one we're talking about right now, because it unfolds over time, and you can't do a snapshot of Mexico. You have to do, or any stories. You have to let it roll out. I think that was a good way to go on that. Did you get editors on the New York Times agreeing with that? Did you have conversations? How did that work?
I mean, the genesis of the story was, I mean, I knew about it in 2017 and I was moved by it, but I didn't know all the details of Miriam and what she'd done. But I marked it and I was like, I want to come back to this. I think there's something powerful here. And then in 2019, with this Violence Project specifically, this was meant to be one of the pieces in the original Violence Project. And I took a couple of trips in 2019 up to Tamaulipas, but by the end of the year, we had so many stories, the editors were like, look, we can't get another one of these in this year. Let's save it for another time. But I didn't leave the story. It was, I mean, I think it just sort of, certain stories take hold of you and start to grow and have their own life inside of you. And you just, I think you suffer if you don't finish them, you know, they live with you. And so this year, I knew we were looking for a big narrative that wasn't COVID related. There's been so much brilliant, devastating, life-altering work done about COVID, but at the same time, regular life still remains a challenge and existential for some people, and we wanted to reflect that. And so that was when I started looking for, how do I update this? And I found the story of this new kidnapping. And then it was just time on the ground, you know, sometimes, and this is a luxury that not everybody has, and I appreciate that that is a luxury that I am afforded, to take it slow, to let it unfold, to see and watch and look for the connective tissue between these seemingly unrelated cases. I was on a call with an editor this morning, and we were talking about how our hope was that Miriam's son, who had taken over her collective, would have been very involved in the case of Luciano, but it didn't turn out that way. And so there wasn't a natural connective tissue until I realized the entire thing was a natural connective tissue. These disappearances, these fearless women who come out and risk their lives to speak out about injustice because they're mothers and they love their children are gone. And weaving those two things together, it almost became, it wasn't connective tissue because they were bound together naturally. And then there were actual moments and scenes where I could bring them together. But I think from a narrative choice, starting with Miriam, she was the heart of the story. And if you are going to try and give people something as heavy as this to read and process and think through, you have to give them a story to follow. You have to make it something that, like, maybe they're learning about Mexico, the dynamic just captivated about the story of there's love. And so that was kind of the guiding light. And then just figuring out how to step these.
Hello? I think maybe we dropped.
Looks like we've got some connectivity issues.
Oh, okay. Are we back?
I think so.
Okay.
Did I just ramble on and not?
I don't think you were cut off by anyone. I think it was fascinating. I mean, that story was incredible. My question too was to focus on that narrative device of things that had happened in the past and bring it into the future. And I just thought that's important for journalism, because so much of our stuff has to start with yesterday or today or this week, and many stories, particularly of this kind, they don't start that way. They start long ago.
Yeah. And I mean, look, the story was kind of there. In some ways it told itself. It was just a matter of, like, getting out of the way and allowing it to unfold, I think.